friends. Welcome to the second part of the introduction to Margaret Atwood. 1964, Atwood moved to Vancouver, where she taught English for a year at the University of British Columbia and completed her first novel, The Edible Woman, in 1969. After a year of teaching literature at St. George Williams University in Montreal, Atwood moved to Alberta to teach creative writing at the University of Alberta. Her poetry collection, The Circle Game, 1966, won the 1967 Governor General's Award, and this is Canada's highest literary honor. So, here in her biography, you can see that Atwood has maintained a kind of balance between uh, her academic activities, that is, teaching at different universities, and at the same time, her creative writing. And it's quite often the case that many good writers, contemporary writers, and earlier ones as well, they had associations with different kinds of universities and have held teaching positions. Now, one thing that stands out about these academicians and writers is that they are in regular interaction with academic activities. Therefore, their connection is there with the critics, and every year they get to teach new students. So they have a close first-hand experience of the changes that gradually emerge with the changing of generations. And at the same time, being a part of a university, they get an opportunity to participate in different activities like conferences, seminars, etc. So they have a lot of scope of exchange of ideas, and at the same time, they can get the views of their readers. And it is always very important for a writer to get a first-hand experience of what their readers think about. So when we talk about Margaret Atwood, she had quite a plenty of that. Public visibility increased significantly with the publication of the poetry collection Power Politics in 1971. But as she became popular, uh, popularity is not an easy thing to handle. You get invited to different kinds of events, and there is media after you all the time, seeking interviews and everything. So she's sought an escape from this increasing media attention, and she left her teaching position at the University of Toronto to move to a farm in Ontario with her husband in 1986. She again received the Governor General's Award for her novel The Handmaid's Tale. And see, Atwood had spent her childhood in the middle of nature with her father, and the writers, they do need a solitude of their own, and it's very difficult for them to concentrate on their creative writing if they are in the public eye all the time. So Atwood took this decision so that she could focus more on her creative writing. Atwood's works have achieved both wide popular readership and much critical attention. Criticism has tended to focus on her political and social views, as they are represented in her works, most notably her feminism, of which she has spoken frequently in interviews. Because her works often portray physical and psychological violence in relationships between men and women, some commentators have labeled Atwood pessimistic and dismissed her as little more than an ideologue, but other critics have hailed her as a visionary interpreter of contemporary feminist thought. See, what we need to understand here is that whenever subjugated people speak, whether they belong to a class or a race or a gender, they tend to disrupt and disturb the established power structures. And in the case of women, obviously, the established power structure is of patriarchy. And the first thing which the critics do, or who uphold patriarchal values, whether they are explicit or implicit, what they do is to label these writers as some kinds of activists. And so they try to take away the credit of humanity which is expressed in their works. So the same thing has happened with Margaret Atwood. And another thing that we need to focus on is that Atwood has held a long career as a professor also. So she had maintained a kind of balance between uh, academics and her own creative writing. And she must have received first-hand views of her readers in many ways, and it makes a writer more grounded. Another thing about feminism is that if you label someone as feminist, what you do is that you take away the kind of sensitivity they show towards entire humanity. Now, it's not always speaking up for a cause, but as relationships evolve in creative works, in novels, you can see that there are many layers, and there are many kinds of, say, torture, and many kinds of exploitations, which might not be visible at an external level, but they do make a dent in the growth of a person. And in Atwood's work, you will see how the women protagonists, they they gradually rise, they are crushed, but after a certain time, they muster up their strength, and they start seeing the truth of what is happening to them, or what is happening to other women, and they muster up this courage to speak up and to take the fight in their own hands. So writers like Margaret Atwood, they need to be read with a more open mind, whether you are a man or a woman. And when we read a writer with an open mind, and completely discarding all the labels that have been put upon them, we can get much more out of them in terms of how they portray life, how the difficulties of life are handled by real people, and what are the ways in which life can be made, or this world can be made a better place to live in terms of relationships and our contribution to society. Thank you. The source for this lecture is www.encyclopedia.com. The primary information I've taken from there, the interpretation is my own. Thank you.